Number 10. First appearance, first defeat. During his very first appearance, Vulture ended up being defeated. He first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 2 and ended that first story he appeared in during the first half of the comic, of course, in prison. Vulture here manages to catch Spider-Man unawares the first time they meet and even kinda captures him. However, Spider-Man escapes and later outsmarts Vulture, realizing that he relies on his wing gadgetry to soar and really has no powers of his own and is just kind of an old guy. Spider-Man creates a device which disables Vulture's wings. Next time the two encounter one another, he uses it during the fight and handily defeats Vulture just like that, clipping the old man's wings and leaving that bird to be caged. Sorry, Adrian. Number 9. Spotter needed. When it comes to Miles Morales' first trip out as Spider-Man, it was embarrassing for both Miles and the first villain he encountered on patrol, Kangaroo. Miles was wearing a Spider-Man costume after Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, had died, and a lot of onlookers felt that this costume was in bad taste because of this. Miles also struggled somewhat with this instigation. He was just kind of getting the hang of his powers. But he got the final punch in his fight against Kangaroo, who had hoisted a car over his head and was about to throw it at Miles. Miles' punch to Kangaroo's chest causes him to drop the car on his own head, making him kinda knock himself out. How embarrassing. Don't worry, Miles does kick him away to safety, so at least he doesn't get crushed by that car. You should always be careful when lifting heavy objects. Case in point. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love when villains get embarrassed, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Inferior Superior. One of the most embarrassing defeats for Otto Octavius around has to be when Spider-Man's heroism and Otto's kinda lack thereof made him realize that despite being called Superior Spider-Man, Otto, who was in Peter Parker's body at the time, was not actually capable of saving the day here. He needed Peter's help. This caused Otto to relinquish the body he stole back to Peter Parker, who still had a remaining consciousness left within it. Surrendering, Otto would later show back up in a clone of Peter's body, but would eventually go back to being the regular old Doc Ock in the end. Stick to what you're best at, maybe, is the moral here. Although I won't lie, I did enjoy watching Superior Spider-Man thwip around the city, beating baddies in Spider-Man's place. There were some things he was pretty good at, but this just wasn't one of them. It was a neat time in the comics. Number 7. Rejected. We've seen this tactic used a few times to beat Venom. Initially, Spider-Man was the one whom the Venom symbiote wanted the most. Spider-Man was initially depicted as the first host and has been the symbiote's first host in a few different versions of the tale. Although in the comics, Venom now has like a whole back history like before Spider-Man, so yeah. That is a thing that happened. In the Spectacular Spider-Man animated show, the fact that Peter is the first host remains to be the true narrative, as well as in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, or the Raimiverse as well actually. In the Spectacular Spider-Man animated show, it's this connection to Spider-Man that Peter uses in order to defeat the symbiote. He creates a rift between Eddie and the Venom symbiote by offering himself to be the symbiote's host, suggesting that the Venom symbiote, never really wanted to be with Eddie and that he was basically kinda like a rebound for them. When the Venom symbiote decides to leave Eddie, this is seemingly confirmed, hurting their relationship. After bonding to Peter, they also learn that Peter was lying and didn't actually want to be with them. And while trying to make Peter be their one and only, he ends up being protected by the memories and mental manifestations of those he loves within his consciousness. You can't make someone love you. Sorry, Venom. You can try, but it's not gonna work. Number 6. Surprise Spider-Man. Surprise! It's Spider-Man! In Superior Spider-Man issue number 31, we get to see Spider-Man embarrass Green Goblin when his return surprises him. You see, Norman thinks that Spider-Man is actually Superior Spider-Man, aka Otto Octavius, but Spider-Man reveals that it's not Otto driving this time around and that Peter Parker is truly Spider-Man once more. And of course, you know what that means. Green Goblin is going down, and Spider-Man is going to make fun of his man purse while he does it. Of course, Peter himself is also surprised to find Norman has changed his face, but this doesn't prevent him from kicking Green Goblin's butt, helping to free Otto's love, Anna Maria, and save the day. Number 5. a not so shocking defeat. Of course, Shocker is generally considered to be a B or even C list Spider-Man villain, and as a result he gets made fun of a lot in the comics normally. But it's somehow even more embarrassing in the Ultimate Universe. In issue number 8 of Ultimate Spider-Man, the issue opens with Spider-Man taking on Shocker and making embarrassingly quick work of him, asking who exactly he's supposed to be, the vibrator? Because yeah, the shock he's emitting is pretty weak. The other hilarious point here is that Spider-Man then turns the shock back on the Shocker, jamming his guns and basically causing him to shock himself. Ouch. Number 4. Watch your step. This embarrassing defeat comes to us from the pages of issue 230 of the Amazing Spider-Man comic. In this two-part story, Spider-Man took on the unstoppable power of the Juggernaut. While physically Peter struggled, Spider-Man eventually figured out a way to put a stop to Juggernaut without having to try and match his strength. Instead, he jumped on his head and he covered his eyes. Because they were fighting in a construction site as Juggernaut flailed around trying to basically get the spider off his head, he accidentally stumbled into some wet cement, sinking down deep and finding himself trapped. So apparently take Juggernaut's eyesight away and he'll basically defeat himself because he's so clumsy. At least that's how it went down this time. Spider-Man of course just leapt to safety after Juggernaut was confirmed as stuck, taking the opportunity to make fun of all of his clumsiness. Poor Juggernaut. Stumblefoot, I think that's what he calls him. You Stumblefoot. Number 3. Back in Black. During the events of the Back in Black storyline, Peter dons his old black costume while trying to hunt down the person responsible for shooting Aunt May. He ends up discovering that Kingpin was behind the hit. In truth, it had actually been a hit put on Peter Parker after it was revealed that he was Spider-Man, but Aunt May was shot instead by accident. As Aunt May lay in the hospital fighting for her life, Peter decided to pay Kingpin a visit in prison. Not caring about his identity any longer, he even removed the top half of his suit, wanting Kingpin to know that this is Peter Parker fighting him, not Spider-Man. Peter brutally beats Kingpin up, humiliating him in front of the other inmates. The whole point is to show Kingpin just how strong Peter is and how he could easily kill Fisk, should he want to. He leaves Kingpin just barely alive to live with the humiliation of what happened, but does warn if Aunt May dies, then he'll be back to finish the job. Considering Fisk is all about being the strongest, most powerful guy in the room, this whole fight would be pretty embarrassing for him. Number 2. Hubris. A lot of Spider-Man's villains carry a certain kind of pride around when it comes to taking on Spidey. They often see themselves as better than Spider-Man, which is how they know they are sure to win. They also often see themselves as better than each other as well. And yet, often they don't end up winning. One of the most embarrassing and smartest defeats occurred when one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains had his ego used against him. Yep, we're talking about Norman Osborn. At this point in time, Norman was actually also bonded to the Carnage symbiote, turning him into the villain that we would refer to as Red Goblin. Well, together these two seemed pretty unstoppable. Armed with both the Goblin serum powers and Carnage's power set, Spider-Man managed to defeat Osborn by getting him to ditch the symbiote. Got in his head. And all it took was taunting Norman to do this, implying that a victory while bonded to the Carnage symbiote would be more a victory for the symbiote than Norman himself, and implying that Osborn couldn't beat Spider-Man alone. This prompted Norman to ditch Carnage, which of course resulted in him being defeated by Spider-Man and company. But really, Spider-Man. Number 1. Defeated by laughter. And of course this list would not be complete if we did not mention one of the most embarrassing defeats of all time, and just in general, most embarrassing villains. Aw, sorry Peter. Paste Pot Pete. This one went down during the Spider-Man Human Torch team-up series in issue number 1. Here Paste Pot Pete is attempting to get revenge on the Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm, when he runs into Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't even fight this poor guy, he just defeats him by embarrassing him. When Peter Petruski reveals his intent and his villainous name of Paste Pot Pete, Spider-Man reacts not by attacking him, but by falling to the ground, laughing at the idea of his ridiculous villain name. Paste Pot Pete ends up just walking away, deciding he should probably change his name. Later on, he would become Trapster, which is a lot better, but still not great in terms of villain names that, you know, aren't ridiculous in some way.
Coming in at number 10, we've got an honorable mention for the time that the Immortal Hulk buried a similarly immortal villain alive within a mountain, in an incident that was a bit less embarrassing and a bit more existentially terrifying. While on the run, the Hulk found himself running into a mad scientist known as Dr. Fry, who had attempted to conquer death through the use of gamma radiation and had accidentally both poisoned his hometown and turned himself into a glowing skeletal creature that would cannibalize anyone stumbling across his mountain cave. Since he was unable to kill him, the Hulk wound up trapping Dr. Fry within his mountain cave without the use of his arms or legs, essentially burying him alive. Note to self: do not get on the Hulk's bad side while also being immortal. Coming in at number 9, we've got either the best or worst Hulk pun of all time used against the Red King. Following his exile from planet Earth, the Hulk found himself as a gladiator combatant on the planet Sakaar, battling in fights overseen by the cruel leader of the planet, Angmo Asan, aka the Red King. In a final battle to take back the planet, the Hulk led a force of rebels against their captors, and went head-to-head against the Red King inside his own arena in a sword duel to the death. And while the fight itself was pretty cool, the icing on the cake was the final pun as the Hulk defeated his foe with his sword and cried out, "Hulk slash." Coming in at number 8, we have the Incredible Hulk vs. Black Bolt, King of the Inhumans. Following the Hulk's extended stay on Sakaar, and following the death of the love that he'd found on the planet, the Hulk began making his way back to Earth to face off against the heroes that had sent him into the cosmos in the first place. He was intercepted on the Earth's moon by Black Bolt, who used his incredibly destructive voice to whisper enough at the Hulk when he refused to back down. An attack that likely would have killed anyone else, but left the Hulk still standing, grinning, and saying, "I didn't come here for a whisper, I want to hear you scream," which just might be the most badass thing ever dared to be said to Black Bolt. Coming in at number 7, we have the Ultimate Hulk literally eating Herr Kaiser. As one of the first major enemies faced by the Ultimate superhero team, Kaiser was a Chitauri warrior that had infiltrated Earth during the Second World War and was able to fight toe-to-toe with both Nick Fury and the Super Serum enhanced Captain America. As a last-ditch effort to defeat the villain, the Ultimates unleashed the Hulk to defeat their shapeshifting foe, who decided to ensure Kaiser could never return by eating his corpse and then destroying the feces that resulted from the meal. There's overkill, and then there's being overkilled by the Hulk. Coming in at number 6, we have the Ultimate Hulk vs. Ultimate Abomination. In another example of the Ultimate Hulk being vicious as hell, the Abomination was an attempt to recreate the conditions that had made the Hulk, but hoping to improve the process and allow him to be controlled. The Abomination had all of the Hulk's strength, but retained all of his human brain power after the transformation, which was intended to help the Abomination permanently put down the Hulk, but still led to Abomination being absolutely torn to shreds, with the Hulk adding salt to the wound by claiming, "You think too much," a final backhanded insult to show that being smarter isn't always going to lead to better outcomes. Coming in at number 5, we have the original Marvel Universe's Hulk vs. Abomination, which somehow manages to be even more of a complete victory than the Ultimate versions. After Abomination was blamed for the death of Bruce Banner's wife, Betty Ross, the Hulk went on a complete rampage to destroy Abomination, something the villain intended to finally figure out which of the two green giants was stronger. But in a final humiliating moment, the Hulk had the opportunity to finally kill Abomination, but instead chose to revert back to Bruce Banner, showing his humanity and proving to Abomination that Banner had the strongest willpower of all, the ultimate defeat for Abomination. Coming in at number 4, we have Hulk smashing Loki in the original MCU Avengers film. For years, comic book fans had been yearning to see a proper adaptation of the Jade Giant on screen. And while earlier live-action Hulk films were ambitious in their own ways and had their own unique moments, the most most iconic and defining Hulk moment finally came when the Hulk joined the Avengers in their first team-up movie and interrupted Loki's monologuing to give him the beatdown he deserved. This was the Hulk we'd all been waiting to see, and hearing Cap tell him to smash, or the Hulk saying puny god, they were definitely worth the wait. Coming in at number 3, we have the Hulk killing Maestro with the explosion that created him in the first place. Bruce Banner often has to face off against different mental versions of the Hulk inside his head, but this alternate version of himself from a post-apocalyptic future is the real deal. Naming himself Maestro after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter, this version of the Hulk had become far stronger than the Hulk's usual starting strength, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. A nice bit of circular karma that showed that Bruce Banner could outwit even his older self. Coming in at number 2, we have Zombie Hulk versus Zombie Thanos. The Hulk and Thanos might not have gotten to get a proper physical rematch in the MCU, but in the Marvel multiverse, their zombie versions had a fight that has to be seen to be believed. 40 years after the initial infection that turned their universe into an undead wasteland, a zombified Thanos decides to pick a fight with an undead Hulk, claiming that the Hulk has eaten more flesh than his fair share. With the eloquence that only a zombie can provide, the Hulk responded by crushing Thanos' skull between his clapping palms, instantly destroying the weakened Mad Titan and showing that maybe you shouldn't tell the Hulk he's been eating too much lately. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the time that the Ultimate Hulk threw the Wolverine's legs up a mountain. While the Wolverine might not count as an outright villain, at this point in the Ultimate Universe, the Hulk and Wolverine were definitely enemies. Tasked by Nick Fury to kill Bruce Banner, the Wolverine got his completely kicked and woke up after their battle to find his lower half entirely missing, ripped off by the Hulk. To make matters worse, his sense of smell let him know that if he wanted to recover his legs and rejoin them to his body with his healing ability, he'd need to climb 4 miles up a mountain. Many people have tried to fight the Hulk over the years, but few people have gotten defeated so embarrassingly as the Wolverine did when his legs got thrown 4 miles away.
Number 10. Hulk. We all know of the famous Hulkbuster suit. But would it just blow your minds if I told you that Iron Man has defeated the Hulk without it? Yes, that's right. In Iron Man issue 132, our Golden Avenger faced off mano-a-mano against the strongest Green Avenger. And when I tell you this was one hell of a fight, I ain't lying. After an attempt at helping Bruce Banner results in the Hulk persona emerging, resulting in Tony donning the suit and protecting his employees, the fight goes from Stark Industries to underwater to an Air Force base where the two basically play baseball with a luggage carrier and Tony's favorite jet. The resulting explosion stunned the Hulk, and in that moment, Tony mustered every bit of solar and reserve energy he could, overriding the safety protocols of his suit to hit the stunned Hulk with a singular massive punch that knocked out Hulk and killed that suit of armor. Number 9. Sentry / The Void. This is one of those do whatever the hell I can to defeat you kind of moments. In the Marvel Siege storyline, Bob Reynolds, the Sentry, one of Marvel's Superman characters, has joined with Norman Osborn and his Dark Avengers, being somewhat taken over by the Void. In the end of the story, the Sentry, using the power of the Void, was directed by Osborn to take out the floating city of Asgard, which he did, sending it crashing to the ground. And then he de-lifed Loki. The other Avengers and Thor have not been able to defeat Sentry / Void yet, so as one last ditch attempt, Iron Man uses a whole Hammer helicarrier as a missile and crashes the whole thing down on top of him. This weakens the Void enough that Thor can end him with a blow from Mjolnir, but damn, Tony really just had enough of this guy. Number 8. Hawkeye. Surprise! Hawkeye does not stand a chance against Iron Man, but he did actually put up a pretty good fight the first 2 times they fought. Both times were in Tales of Suspense in issue 57 and 60. Hawkeye's first appearances before he was actually a hero, when he was instead a criminal. Natasha Romanoff, who is also a criminal at the time, tricks Clint into helping her steal Tony's powerful tech. It doesn't go too well for them though. At the end of the first fight in issue 57, Tony gets Clint clinging onto a pole, which he then bends and flicks like one of those little door stopper things, thwanging little Robin Hood here into the water and then saving the unconscious Clint from drowning. Doth mother know you have not liked or subscribed? Well, that's okay if you don't want to, but it would be appreciated. Okay, let's move on. Number 7, Luke Cage. Alright, we covered Luke Cage getting his butt handed to him the first time around, but I found a hilarious and much more subtle embarrassment dished out by Spidey. In New Avengers Volume 1, number 51, after Spider-Man revealed his identity to the Avengers, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage's wife, recognizes him because they went to high school together, and she had the biggest crush on Peter. Now, fast forward to issue number 53, Spider-Man and the New Avengers are floating in their Quinjet above New Orleans, looking for a place to land, when Spider-Man starts talking to Luke Cage about his wife apparently being in love with Spider-Man in high school, which he had no idea about, and while she's cute and all that, he believes in the statutes of marriage and the institutions, so Luke has nothing to worry about from him. But if him and Iron Fist broke up, then he'd like to get in on that action, you know? Luke just wants out as he calls Clint to land the damn plane already. Number 6, Emma Frost. Did you know the Avengers fought the X-Men? Yes, it's true. And a comic titled, get this, Avengers vs. X-Men. It's a good title. Seriously though, the conflict blossomed when the Phoenix Force is headed straight to Earth with mutant Hope Summers as its supposed host. The Avengers believe this is bad juju for the population of Earth, and the X-Men think this is gonna be what they need for the mutant population to be reborn. A battle happens between the two teams at the mutant island of Utopia. Partway through, Emma Frost comes to make a move, saying telepathically to Cyclops she can shut down the Avengers telepathically, and she is going to end this. Then Iron Man chimes in, I bet you thought you were just about to end this, as he fires microscopic telepathic tasers at her and hopes she will let him make it up to her over dinner. She punches him in the stomach and he blasts back with his repulsors, but this genuinely made me snicker. Number 5, Phoenix, Colossus, and Magic. A duo? And this duo? I know, it's crazy. In Avengers vs. X-Men number 9, a group of 5 X-Men were granted quite the power boost in the form of the Phoenix Force. The mutant siblings Colossus and Magic were 2 of these X-Men. Now, Spider-Man is physically no match for either one of these guys, not with the Phoenix Force. But Spider-Man isn't one to let something like that stop him. Even when beaten to a pulp, he still has that charming personality and beautiful brain. When one of the avatars for the Phoenix Force is defeated, the power of the remaining 4 gets boosted even more, and it's just these 2 left. And Spider-Man gives them a little innocent reminder of that fact. Now, we don't get to see the fight that takes place between the 2. Instead, we get to see the unconscious bodies of both of them, with Spider-Man still barely standing to let everyone know he got them to knock each other out. Number 4, Namor. Iron Man and Namor the Submariner have always had a pretty tense relationship, both having massive egos. They have gone at it with their words and their fisticuffs multiple different times. From what I can tell, the powerful Submariner usually has the win more than often. But Iron Man isn't a pushover. He's gotten some good shots, and in Iron Man number 25 in 1970, we have an example of him winning, in a somewhat hilarious way too. Basically, unbeknownst to Tony, his company had been polluting the ocean with a pipeline. Now yes, that is very, very bad. But if you just go and talk to Tony, I'm sure he'd fix the issue. No, that is not the Submariner's way. No, instead, he attacks, destroying the pipeline and then attacking the buildings it's connected to. To subdue Namor, Tony uses the heating coils of his suit to evaporate all the water in Namor's body, basically rendering him powerless. And then he ties him up to an under construction tower using metal beams. It's kind of hilarious looking, and I feel like Namor could easily slip out of that, like the power of gravity, but it's certainly embarrassing.
Number 3, Love Frenzy. There was that one time Bruce Banner as the Hulk completely lost it, going into a frenzy that caused him to try and both chase down and beat up She-Hulk. And not only that either. It turns out this whole attempt to do so was actually kind of part of a mating ritual thing. It seems that Hulk forgot that She-Hulk was his cousin. because he was in a frenzied Hulk form. Luckily, Hulk didn't get his way here and was eventually set right again. Although in the Old Man Logan universe, the two do apparently end up together, and we don't really know if Jen was like here for that or not. Either way, the whole ordeal is pretty embarrassing for Jen, but also likely embarrassing for Bruce as well, if he was told about it afterwards. It's just embarrassing all around, and also pretty, like, squicky. Ugh.
Number 2. Daredevil. You know what? I really liked Superior Iron Man. The story was cool, and Tony was, well, he was kind of an almost villain, honestly. Specifically, there were 2 times with Daredevil that showcased this really well. After Tony got the whole population of San Francisco addicted to a social media platform, and then began charging them subscription fees for it, trust me, it's a lot more sinister than I'm making it sound, Daredevil goes to Tony's base on Alcatraz Island to confront him, and shut him down. Obviously, that wasn't going to go the way he wanted it to. But even I didn't expect Tony to just pick him up by the throat, tell him he's always welcome but to leave the attitude at home, and then straight up just chuck the blind superhero without fear into the freezing waters of the San Francisco Bay. Cold. Literally. Number 1. Captain America. We love Civil War. Not the actual Civil War, the Marvel one. So many great examples of superheroes fighting other superheroes. But the main star of the show in this conflict is Iron Man versus Captain America. And while the climactic fight ultimately ended in a Captain America favored draw, I'd say the first major fight was definitely more of a win for Tony. In issue 3 and 4 of the main Civil War comic, a battle takes place between the forces of both Cap and Stark. While Steve is fighting Spider-Man, Iron Man comes swooping in, attacking with an armor that's analyzed every fight Cap has ever had. And he just starts going to town on the guy, feeding him the left, right, until Cap is absolutely battered. Cap still doesn't go down, so Tony uses a high frequency that shuts down the human brain. He's about to end the fight when Hercules jumps in, attacking him with an oil tanker truck.
Number 10. Outsmarted. One of the most famous fights between the Hulk and the Thing also happens to be one of the first. This one goes down in Fantastic Four issue number 12, where the Fantastic Four are led to believe that the Hulk is the one behind a bunch of destruction, an attempt to get together to try and stop him. However, this does not end up working out very well. That's because the Hulk is not only the strongest there is, but he also manages to outsmart them almost completely. Hulk realizes that the FF have the advantage, since together they are very powerful, but if he can take them on one by one, then he stands a better chance at defeating them. That's right, it wasn't even his brute strength, but his strategy that allowed him to defeat the Fantastic Four this time around. Well, almost. The Thing seemingly defeats the Hulk with his piledriver punch, but in reality, his punch misses, and it was actually an energy ray that hit the Hulk and knocked him out. Fortunately though, this reveals to the FF that the Hulk was not behind all the destruction, and yeah. They can at least now go after the people that are actually responsible. Number 9. Illuminate the Truth. In the secondary short comic that is included in the World War Hulk prologue Worldbreaker, titled Round Trip, we get to see an alternate Hulk embarrass a group he refers to as the Illuminators, obviously the more cartoonish version of the Illuminati. This group ends up sending Hulk to space and another planet in a spaceship, ultimately because he stole Namor's sandwich. How does Hulk embarrass them? In a similar fashion to his plan in the reality of Earth 616, he ends up heading homeward after the group exiles him. Here, he doesn't necessarily seem to have the same trauma behind him as he does on 616, fueling his rage even more, but the Illuminators are still completely in a tizzy over the fact that the Hulk ship seems to be on a return course after they sent him away. Except Namor. Namor feels safe knowing that he lives deep in the ocean and that if the surface world gets all smashed up, he and his kingdom will probably still be good. And friends, before we move on to the next spot on this list, if you love our channel and you love our content, be sure to head on over to Facebook to show us that love and support by giving us a follow and a like. I think that's one of the things you do on Facebook. You like stuff. Hey. Number 8. To Hear You Scream. Speaking of World War Hulk, one of the most embarrassing fights comes from the very beginning of that event, in World War Hulk issue number 1, when Hulk faces off against Black Bolt. Black Bolt and his queen Medusa, you see, have some ego, which ends up quickly turning into hubris for them. Black Bolt had fought the Hulk before and won, so it was for this reason that they barely even gave Hulk the time of day when he shows up. When Hulk rushes them both, angry for what has happened to his people and the planet that he freed and made his own, Black Bolt only responds with a whisper, saying, "Enough." and with the force of his words pushing Hulk far back. But Hulk ends up coming out on top as he immediately recovers and leaps back at Black Bolt. He didn't come to Attilan for a whisper, he came to hear Black Bolt scream, and it definitely seems like he makes him scream. He does not look like he's in great shape after that conversation.
Number 7. Captain Marvel and Gamora. Combo! Wham bam! Actually, more like pew pew. Look, love it or hate it, the second Marvel Civil War event happened. I could get into what the conflict itself was actually about, but that doesn't really have anything to do with this point. The main thing you need to know is that, just like the first Civil War, the superhuman community is split, with Iron Man leading one side and Carol Danvers leading the other. At the time of this story, Iron Man was sporting his Model Prime armor, an armor that could basically shapeshift and change color for whatever it was he needed to do at the time, making the need for multiple armors a little redundant. During a conflict with Captain Marvel and her group, Tony was under attack from some pretty powerful heroes, specifically Captain Marvel and Gamora jumped in to do battle before they were dispatched from a single blast from Iron Man. Just one shot is all he needed. Damn.
Number 6. Bustin' makes me feel not so good. In the case of Tony Stark, that is. While the Hulkbuster became a famous suit of armor in the Avengers film franchise, we also know it from the comics. During the events of World War Hulk, Tony attempted to use this armor to defeat the Hulk when he returned to Earth and threatened to destroy it if he wasn't given the heroes responsible for sending him into space. One of which who was responsible was Tony, who actually initially created the Illuminati group that sent the Hulk away. Tony had also created nanotech, which would in theory be capable of suppressing the Hulk's powers, actually even forcibly using it on Jennifer Walters previously, which she actually sued him for in return. However, the Hulkbuster, the nanosuppressant, even the big bombs that they attempted to use all did nothing. Hulk's pain was so intense, his anger so great, that he became powerful enough to survive all of this and remain in his Hulk form. So apparently it doesn't matter how smart you are, Tony, or how prepared. In the end, if Hulk wants to smash, he's going to continue to smash. You can't Hulk bust your way out of that one.
Number 5. Facial hair bros. Right smack dab in the middle of the video, sort of, not really, I want to do something completely different. Something finally not combat related. Yet a victory for Tony and an embarrassment for none other than Stephen Strange the Sorcerer Supreme. In Invincible Iron Man number 3, Iron Man goes to Doctor Strange for help with a little problem he is having. As he's about to leave the Sanctum Sanctorum, he goes, "Thanks, Doctor," and stays there like this for 8 comic book panels, until Steven gives him a very, very reluctant high five as Tony yells, "Awesome, facial hair bros!" And Steven says, "I hate you." I'm sorry, I had to include this.
Number 4. Hot tubbing. While some people might focus on when Hulk beat Thor in Thor Ragnarok in the MCU when it comes to embarrassing moments, I think there is one that tops that. After the fight, Thor is taken to Hulk's private quarters, where his wounds are tended to. When he awakes with a start, he notices Hulk is also there in what appears to be a hot tub? Hulk hot tub. Thor asks Hulk about how he ended up here, and when he finds out that he crash landed on Sakaar via a Quinjet, asks him where the Quinjet is. Hulk responds by getting up out of the tub and crossing the room to where the window is to show Thor the current location of the Quinjet now. This is when Thor learns that Hulk was, naked in that hot tub, which prompts him to seemingly avert his eyes and remark on how that image is now permanently burned into his mind. Yeah, he looks pretty uncomfortable and pretty embarrassed. Oh boy.
Number 3. Clint Barton as Ronan. During Dark Reign, the Avengers were more of a covert rogue team. Their leaders were lost in civil war. Secret Invasion had put everyone against everyone, unsure of who was a Skrull and who wasn't, and now Norman Osborn was in charge of everything. The new Avengers know they've got to find some way of getting Norman. Clint Barton, who was Ronan at the time, tried a media smear campaign and it didn't really go too well. So now, he just wants him gone, and he suggests just that in New Avengers issue 55. Spider-Man word slaps the gathered Avengers into their senses. Peter steps out right in the face of the idea of de-lifing anyone. Am I the only one here who wants to, act heroic in the face of adversity? He goes on to say that now that they don't have their Tony Stark money or Avengers Mansion and butlers, that Ronan is cracking up under the weight of the real world. Yeah, tell him, Spidey. Yeah.
Number 2. Ripped in 2. Wow, I like how I made number 2 ripped in 2. I didn't do that on purpose. but that's good. When Ultimate Wolverine and Ultimate Hulk fought one another in the Ultimate Universe, Hulk pretty much put Wolverine to shame. In this alternate universe of Earth 1610, Wolverine was hired by Nick Fury to track down the Hulk. Wolverine tracked him down alright, but wasn't so good at dealing with him once he did. At one point, Hulk tears Wolverine straight down the middle and tosses his legs so far away that Logan has a challenging time recovering them. And of course I mean right down the middle, not down the middle this way, like down across the middle, I guess I should say. In this reality, Wolverine can't just grow new legs, by the way. In order to recover, he needs to find and basically reattach his legs so that his healing powers, or his survival powers more like, can basically take effect and kick in and heal him. So yeah, he had to crawl all the way over to find his legs in the snow. Great. Also, mountains. There were mountains there. Number 1. Why are you hitting yourself? Well, Thor and Hulk fought in Ragnarok, where Hulk only really won against Thor thanks to the help of Grand Master, tasing Thor until he passed out, just as he was figuring out how to harness the power of lightning without his hammer too. In the comics, these two have fought actually multiple times. One such occasion involved a showdown where Hulk made fun of Thor for having long hair, mistaking him for a hairy lady and telling him that he should get a haircut. Thor, of course, did not take too kindly to these remarks about his long golden locks, which he quite loves, and fought back against Hulk with his hammer Mjolnir. However, Thor ended up surprised when Hulk refused to surrender, claiming he was the strongest there will ever be, before grabbing Thor's hammer arm and then making Thor basically hit himself with Mjolnir. Ouch. Hey Thor, why are you hitting yourself?
And at 10, Superman. The Dark Multiverse is a mysterious dimension. It lies outside of the normal universe. In one of the many universes in the Dark Dimension, Superman went rogue and killed off every hero and villain. No one could actually stop him. The last remaining hero was of course Batman, who could not even believe that his best friend could have done all this. But Batman had a plan. Fail-safe. Surprise. He had studied Doomsday's body and created a virus that could turn himself into a version. Batman then became Doomsday, killed Superman, and then decided to spread this virus all over the earth, turning everyone into a form of Doomsday, which not only humiliates Superman but also kind of embarrassed Batman himself. I mean, like, he probably went nuts because of the whole like he was part Doomsday thing, but still. And at 9, Calabac. Batman had gone toe to toe with the New Gods on 2 occasions prior to the New 52, in Comic Odyssey and Final Crisis respectively, but this time he came with a vengeance. In the wake of Damian Wayne's death in the finale of Batman Inc., Bruce happens upon Ra's al Ghul's attempt to resurrect his son in a Lazarus pit, along with his former lover Talia. He prevents the head of the demon from bringing them back to life, as they would emerge as Raz's servants. But before they can actually stop Damian's body from being resurrected, his body gets snatched, and his dead son is ripped from Batman's grasp. And then this guy heads back to Apokolips. This leads Batman to deploy the Hellbat armor and venture all the way to Apokolips to retrieve his son, and in the process ends up fighting Darkseid and Calabac, the Lord of Apocalypse's faithful son. And at 8, White Martians. Grant Morrison's Justice League run features the world falling under attack from the villainous White Martians, and it's up to the Justice League, obviously, to stop them. Also, like in the cartoons version of this story, the decisive blow is finally dealt by Batman, who is so badly underestimated by the White Martians because he lacks the superpowers of his fellow teammates. The White Martians managed to capture all of the Justice League and assumed that Batman was killed when they shot down the Batwing. However, the Dark Knight had survived the wreckage because of his plot armor and deduced that they were just as susceptible to fire as Martian Manhunter, due to the fact that they didn't come near his burning plane. Batman swoops in, sets everything on fire like a pointy-eared Human Torch, and saves his teammates. Another lesson in why you should never underestimate him, which reminds me of when Oliver Queen shot all the Dominators with their own gun in the Invasion crossover on the CW after escaping Dreamworld, which is still one of my favorite Arrow episodes. And at 7, Cersei. Amazon's Attack was a short crossover that released in the build-up to Final Crisis. The comic saw Cersei manipulate the Amazons into invading the United States, believing that Wonder Woman had been detained by the Department of Metahuman Affairs, which wouldn't really make sense given that she's an Amazon and not a metahuman, but anyway. The Justice League was sent in response, or chose to go on their own at least, and wouldn't you guess it, Batman is right in the front lines. The Amazon Attacks crossover sees the Sorceress underestimate Batman and suffer embarrassment as a result. Batman enlists the help of Zatanna to defeat Cersei, and the League's preeminent magician casts a spell on the Wonder Woman adversary that renders her powerless for a short period of time, allowing for the Dark Knight to get the drop on her and lay the groundwork for Wonder Woman to swoop in and deliver the final blow. And at 6, Deathstroke. When it comes to comics, Batman and Deathstroke have faced off with each other on many occasions, with no definitive results going one way or the other. One of the most recent battles in the aptly titled Batman vs. Deathstroke comic saw the two fight into a stalemate. It's a fitting conclusion with a duel between the world's greatest detective and the world's deadliest assassin. Bats and Deathstroke then fought each other on top of a cable car dangling over Gotham Harbor. And just as when it seems as though Slade has gotten the upper hand, the Caped Crusader is able to ensnare him with his grapple gun and save the hostage position nearby, at least in the short-lived Beware the Batman animated series, which was released for one season in 2013. Deathstroke may be one of the deadliest figures in the DC universe, but that didn't stop Batman from giving this Terminator reject his just desserts. Halfway through into number 5, Darkseid. Bruce Wayne was at first not really taken seriously by Darkseid. As a matter of fact, Batman uses the element of being underestimated as like his greatest superpower basically. Batman doesn't kill, but he was forced to kill when Darkseid threatened Earth. The only known substance that could kill a new god is radion, so Batman shot Darkseid with a radion bullet and caused himself to die in the process. Darkseid, for that matter, had Batman as the last person in mind that could actually stop him. He thought if anybody was going to kill him, it would be Clark Kent, so yeah. Up until this point, the only human or sentient being, for that matter, that has truly made Darkseid, the god of evil in the DC universe, cower and run away is Batman. In it for Reverse Flash. A pride point for basically all speedsters, especially evil speedsters, is how fast they can move, how they're faster than a speeding bullet, and how they're basically impossible to hit. So imagine our surprise when Reverse Flash ends up getting popped in the head by none other than Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline, so that Barry Allen could access enough Speed Force to save the world and bring his son back. And while this apparently killed Thawne, that was far from it. Thawne actually started vibrating as fast as he could to slow the destruction of his brain. This actually gave Thawne more time to try and avoid death, or to try and find a way to do so, and gave him the ability to hold quite the grudge. Humiliated by getting killed by Batman of all people, Thawne sets out to be even worse than usual, even ripping up the letter that Thomas Wayne gave to Barry to give to Bruce, the only contact that Bruce has had with his parents since they died. The only contact with a living version, which is absolutely brutal. Batman was like ugly crying, and ooh, it was not pretty. Getting close to the end into number 3, the Riddler. Batman Universe is an absolute gem of a comic. The series spotlights Batman in a time-traveling, universe-spanning adventure that takes him all the way from present-day Gotham to Thanagar, then back in time to the Wild West where he meets Jonah Hex, and then all the way back to the present again. This series starts off somewhat innocuously, however. It's kind of simple, with a confrontation with the Riddler. Only Batman can tell that something isn't quite right. The Riddler's riddle this time was simply, when is the Riddler not the Riddler? And both the Dark Knight and Alfred agree that this is way below Nigma's usual standard. After chasing Riddler down and asking why he's stolen a priceless Fabergé egg, Batman also expresses concern at Nigma's behavior. It comes off as sincere concern, but there's an element of condescension in there as well about how Riddler just isn't riddling like he used to, and honestly, he's trash at the moment, basically. And it's even more obvious that this is kind of Batman's tone when Green Arrow shows up and Batman literally says, "You're embarrassing yourself in front of Green Arrow. Are you feeling alright?" Which is kind of a dig at both Nigma and Oliver. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Justice League. The Justice Buster Batsuit is a mech suit part of Batman's Fenrir contingency, designed to take down the entirety of the Justice League, making its feature appearance in Batman Endgame when the Joker used his virus to warp the brains of the Justice League as the beginning of his Endgame plot. Batman was forced to use the Fenrir protocol to eliminate his teammates. The suit was successful in eliminating Wonder Woman, the Flash, and Aquaman, but met an even match at the hands of Superman. After a lengthy fight, Superman tore through the armor and nearly killed Batman until Bruce used kryptonite chewing gum and spit it in Clark's face, rendering him unconscious. Come on! Like, imagine waking up to learn that you passed out because Batman spit on your face. Like, seriously, bro, please brush your tongue when you brush your teeth. Your breath is absolutely lethal. Not to mention the miniaturized red suns for Knuckles, ancient Greek supernatural weaponry weaponry, super fast servers, and electromagnetic nerve trees for a sensor array that are also in the suit. And finally, in at number 1, the Joker. Mad Love is one of the most beloved episodes of Batman the Animated Series, but the story of the episode was first told in the show's tie-in comic, The Batman Adventures. The story provides an in-depth look into Harley Quinn's origin and the full extent of her abusive relationship with the Joker. After her anniversary plans end with her being thrown out of a window by Mr. J, she decides that the only way to win her Puddin's affection is to capture and kill Batman. And she succeeds, well, at capturing. But Joker isn't happy about that. If anyone's gonna take Batman down, it's going to be him. And he lashes out at Harley once again, leaving him alone with the Dark Knight. Batman and Joker then fight, obviously, but Batman's able to use Harley's successful scheme to his advantage, taunting the Joker that she came closer than he ever has to actually killing him, and concluding this joke by calling him Puddin', which is one of the funniest things I think Batman has ever done. Being usually a brooding and dark hero who still refuses to kill despite his darkness, calling his greatest enemy by his girlfriend's pet name is one of the best moments for Batman ever.
Number 10. General Koi and Prince Baran get spooked. Wrapping up the events involving Terra Verde's civil unrest and the face-off with Spore in issue number 23 of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine decided upon his return to Madripoor that it was time to give General Koi and Prince Baran a taste of their own medicine. While Prince Baran was a sometimes ally of Wolverine's, for this story he was more playing the role of sometimes villain or antagonist that he's also known for in the series. As such, in the middle of the night, Wolverine pays a visit to both men and kidnaps them. They awaken blindfolded in the sewers, where Wolverine explains the extent of what can happen if the vial of the drug that Koi chose to keep were unleashed on someone, how it would basically make them go insane. It could also potentially unleash a darker evil who was only just defeated, Spore. Really not cool for you to keep that vial, Koi. Koi and Baran fear that Wolverine has administered the to them, terrified. They discover, however, that this is not the case, and instead that the only threat in these sewers is an equally deadly and very angry Wolverine. Horrified, they run in fear and escape from the sewers, only to be laughed at by the people of Madripoor as they surface, covered in sewage. Hopefully they learn their lesson. Knowing General Koi though, probably not, because then he does a lot of other stuff. Number 9. Unintentionally embarrassed Sabretooth. Sure, Wolverine is all for putting Victor in his place. Once he met the guy and knew how bad he was, that is. But before that, the Creeds were just a family that Wolverine kinda got tied up in. Logan ended up captured and in a circus being used as an attraction. Something about the X-Men and circuses, I tell you, it happens a lot. This was really a low point in Wolverine's life as he was suffering from severe depression after the death of Rose, and then following that, the death of his wolf pack by Nathaniel Essex's Bear, which was really upsetting because he'd taken a lot of solace in his pack. In the end, it was Clara Creed who managed to reach out to Logan, saving him both physically and emotionally. The two fell in love with one another quickly, but it didn't end well for either of them. Saul Creed, Clara's little brother, sold them out. Once this was revealed, Logan felt the only way to protect Clara was to get rid of Saul, permanently. Clara was ready to cut Saul out of her life, but didn't want to see him killed. Because Logan killed Saul, she rejected him. And because Logan killed Saul, Victor interpreted it as a slight, embarrassed that Logan had been the one to kill Saul, as Saul was Victor's to torment. Victor would visit Saul each year on his birthday to beat him up. So yeah, hence why Sabretooth visits Wolverine each year now instead, because he was like, how dare you do this to me? This is unacceptable. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more times that Wolverine kind of embarrassed his villains intentionally and unintentionally, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Blew up Dracula. If you've been surprised by Dracula appearing as a Wolverine villain in his current 2020 series, don't be. These two actually have a lot of history, and the mutants themselves have also tangled with vampires in general in the past. Old Man Logan even faced Dracula before, when mutants were disappearing and he was on the trail of tracking down his good pal and one of his sidekicks back in the day, Jubilee. This time around, however, Dracula seems to be interested in harnessing Wolverine's blood for its healing properties, and using the blood to help all vampires walk in the daylight without danger of going up in flames and perishing. Wolverine, however, literally blew up Dracula's well-laid plans when he took part in a plan to turn his body into a bomb. Well, more a devoid of consciousness clone body. This body was then offered to Dracula by his less than faithful servant Omega Red, which means instead of walking in the daylight, much of Drax's following instead went up in smoke, as Wolverine's clone's blood was altered to be like liquid sunshine to the vamps, thick with photonic cells, and so he became a dirty bomb. Or well, his clone became a dirty bomb. Number 7. Avon Calling. Not necessarily a great super villain of Wolverine's per se, but in issue number 30 of of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine managed to embarrass a whole team of Madripoorian militia and palace guards when he was dealing with the masterminds behind the Lazarus Project. As he and his allies aim to infiltrate the palace and confront General Coy, Broker, not to be confused with the Power Broker, and Dr. Page, Wolverine walks right up to the guard, and when he asks who goes there, answers, "Avon calling." Wolverine can be nonchalant and make jokes here because he's got Karma on his team. Rather than respond with an attack, Karma basically takes hold of the guard's mind and then has him take them into the palace under the guise of his prisoners. Of course, this ruse doesn't last for too long, but it does last long enough to get them into the palace at least, and to basically where they need to go. Number 6. Ruined Merchant's Auction. When Wolverine donned his patch disguise to return once more to Madripoor, it was quickly revealed to him that everyone kinda already knew who he was. And while he had come to save a former teammate from being auctioned off as a weapon, he himself ended up on the auctioning block. But although the merchant saw his presence as an opportunity, in the end he realized his mistake, as Wolverine didn't just get away with Maverick as intended, but pretty much ruined his whole auction and Merchant's whole catalog besides. You can check out how badly Wolverine ruined this party by checking out issues number 9 and 10 of the 2020 Wolverine series. Number 5. Resisted the change. Wolverine's healing factor doesn't just protect him from severe injuries, it also protects him against supernatural related monster rules such as how they dictate transformations. And if he does end up getting affected by said rules, the change is typically only temporary for him. Eventually his healing factor will basically cure him. Case in point, when Old Man Logan faced off with Dracula during his hunt for Jubilee. Dracula managed to attack Wolverine and even bite him in this second volume of Old Man Logan, but the joke was on Drac. Wolverine's healing factor protected him from giving into vampirism, and we learned that he was immune to said bite and its effects. Sorry, Dracula. In the end, Wolverine came out on top, managing to later on decapitate Dracula. Obviously, he came back, but for the Prince of Darkness, King of Lies, Lord of the Undead, this was a pretty embarrassing defeat. Especially as he bit him and then he was like, yes, this didn't work, but that's fine. I'm sure it's taking all of your healing factor to fight off the vampirism. I don't know if it was actually taking all of his healing factor. He did look a little rough, but I feel like Wolverine was like, yeah, sure, bub, all of my healing factor. Number 4. Bad karaoke for Maverick and Merchant. Later on in the current Wolverine series, Maverick would take a job from Merchant, deciding in the end to work with him despite Merchant attempting to auction him off previously, and thereby putting Maverick in the crosshairs of Wolverine. With the two at odds fighting over information stored on a Krakoan bug, Wolverine in the end decided to let Maverick think he stole that bug back from him and his friend CIA agent Jeff Bannister, only for Maverick to learn later while handing it over to Merchant that the bug was actually wiped clean and the information on it replaced with tons of Johnny Cash karaoke, likely taken from performances at the Green Lagoon's karaoke night. Oh boy. Number 3. Omega Red versus the Wolverines. You mess with the Wolverine, you get a bunch of them that you have to deal with. You get all the Wolverines. As was evident when Omega Red came to Krakoa seeking to claim what his mutant given right was, to take refuge on the new mutant island nation. And, you know, not be condemned or anything, even though he did bad stuff in the past. However, not everyone was able to forgive and forget when it came to his past, namely Wolverine. Still suspicious of Omega Red, once it seemed as though he'd seen him appear outside of Krakoa and kinda trap him in ice, Wolverine was ready to confront him, already having an uneasy feeling about his former nemesis since pretty much day one. However, when Wolverine explained what had happened to him, to his family, they weren't ready to let him go in alone. He was joined by Daken and Gabby, who both showed Omega Red how easy it was to sneak up on him and get him in a trap. In the end, the discussion had to be tabled, but it was pretty fun to see the look on his face when the Wolverine family came together to attack him. If you were wondering where Laura was, by the way, she'd likely still be in the vault at this time, as per her adventures in the 2019 X-Men series, which is why she wasn't there. Otherwise, I'm sure Laura would also be there. Number 2. Found the perfect match for Solemn. After it was revealed that Solemn had taken Logan's Muramasa blade and ended up giving one such blade to the Iraqi pirate, Severe, during Solemn's escape from him, Wolverine tracked Solemn down. He confronted Solemn and was convinced to take on Sever with him together. Later, Solemn bailed on this confrontation in typical Solemn fashion, it seems. However, Wolverine had a few tricks up his sleeve. Realizing that he and Solemn were fairly even matched, he decided to call in some reinforcements. Wolverine went to the White Queen, Emma Frost, and had her join him in their confrontation of Solemn, which she was happy to do as she had her own score to settle with him. They pursued Solemn to the the sliver of remaining Araco Island on Earth where he was hiding out. And let's just say that while Wolverine and Solemn could likely fight against one another all day to only really reach a stalemate, Emma was out of Solemn's league. She interrogated him, much to his dismay and embarrassment, because Emma of course can easily access almost anyone's hidden dirty secrets and desires, no matter how dirty and secret and hidden they are. So now she knows everything about Solemn, whether she wanted to or not. Number 1. Ultimate Family Jewels. Oh boy. Of course, a lot of embarrassing moments would come from the Ultimate Universe, wouldn't they? This one hails from issue number 12 of the Ultimate X-Men series. Here, Ultimate Wolverine and Ultimate Sabretooth face off, only for Wolverine to completely embarrass Victor in this fight. As Sabretooth holds Wolverine beneath the water, making him suffocate and killing his brain cells, Wolverine counterattacks by going for his, family jewels, as he calls them. His retort to Sabretooth mocking how he'll never be considered a brainiac now turns to tears and pain as Wolverine responds that at least he's smart enough to cover his family jewels in a fight before he tackles Sabretooth off a cliff. Wow, what a way to finish a fight.
Number 10. The Human Torch. Johnny Storm and Peter Parker have been very close friends for a long time. And in comic books, where there is friendship, there is competitive rivalry. In the first video, I talked about the time the Fantastic Four first met Spider-Man, and the way he embarrassed every single one of them. Well, now I want to talk about something a little sillier. In the Spider-Man / Human Torch I'm With Stupid miniseries, Johnny Storm hires Peter Parker to get really good pictures of him since he just became a hero and he wanted some good publicity. Yes, really. Wanting some pictures of Johnny against a villain, he goes to Dr. Doom's lair and gets himself encased in a block of ice. Yes, really, again. Spider-Man saves him and swings him away and makes web ice picks to start getting Johnny out of his popsicle form. But after Johnny struggles a little bit too much, Peter accidentally chips away the part of ice holding Johnny's beloved golden hair, leaving him bald and crying for Reed Richards to fix the problem. Yes, really, for a third time. Number 9. Ghost Rider. Say what you want about Spider-Man, but he is a hero, through and through. And sometimes he needs to remind others how to be that. In Spider-Man number 7 in 1990, Spider-Man and Ghost Rider are working together to defeat Hobgoblin. A kid named Adam gets grabbed by Hobgoblin, causing Spider-Man to look for a less direct approach. But not Ghost Rider. He barrels straight into Hobgoblin on his motorcycle, hitting Adam as well. Spider-Man gets to Adam before he crashes right into a wall. As Ghost Rider gets his hands on the unconscious Hobgoblin and is about to do his penance stare on him, Spider-Man interrupts him, saving Hobgoblin and giving Ghost Rider an earful about what it means to be a hero, sending him walking away in shame. Number 8. Doctor Strange. If you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't yet, allow me to explain, or skip to the next point if you don't want spoilers, but I promise you, I'll keep it light. Okay, so basically a whole whack of stuff takes place and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man end up fighting over an artifact. During the scuffle, Doctor Strange brings him and Peter to the mirror dimension, where things just go, well, kind of spirally and just insane. It's actually a really fun scene to watch, but basically, Peter realizes the mirror dimension is based on geometry, and he's great at geometry. And utilizing the absolutely amazing power of math, he strings up Doctor Strange, takes the artifact and Strange's sling ring, and leaves him webbed up and stuck in the mirror dimension. Hey you, I just wanted to briefly stop you here, just to say, thanks. Thanks for being you. And thanks for liking and commenting and subscribing. I love reading your comments, even the mean ones. You should check us out on Facebook too if you wanna. Alright, moving on.
Number 7. Size isn't everything. It really isn't in terms of battle, as is proven in the Ultimates issue number 5. You see, in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, Hulk isn't exactly a hero. Here the Avengers are known as the Ultimates, although there is also an Avengers team in this reality, but trust me, they aren't quite the heroic equivalent to the 616 team that we know. But the Ultimates pretty much are that. As Hulk goes on a rampage downtown, the Ultimates must band together in an effort to defeat him. And to be clear, in this reality, Hulk isn't on the Ultimates. The first one up to bat to try to tackle this big beast is Giant Man, aka Hank Pym. He attempts to defeat the Hulk as, well, a giant man. But just because Hulk is smaller than Hank doesn't mean he can't still pack a punch. While Giant Man attempts to hold Hulk beneath his hands and ask him to calm down, also calling him puny, Hulk responds by jumping onto Giant Man's face and threatening to rip his head off and use it like a toilet bowl, before punching his lights out. Proving that, yeah, even if you think, well, I'm a lot bigger than the Hulk, it doesn't mean that the Hulk can't mess you up.
Number 6. Firelord. Okay, look, he's not a hero. Well, he's hardly an anti-hero. In fact, he's kind of an anti-villain. But Firelord, the former Herald of Galactus and eventual member of the Nova Corps, came to Earth wanting to partake in all the great stuff we got going on here, only to be attacked by firefighters and eventually Spider-Man himself. And now, he wants revenge for the embarrassment. Look, he's not from here, okay? Just because he has different ideas of what's fair doesn't mean that he's evil, right? After Spidey leads the spicy Firelord on a chase all around New York, he decides to engage him hand to hand. And boy does he go off, dodging every swing against him with his spider sense and landing countless blows on the alien, leaving him unconscious when the Avengers show up to pull Spider-Man off of him.
Number 5. J'accuse. Blade is one of the newest members of the Avengers main roster, and being new, it seems that he doesn't quite understand how best to deal with other Avengers members, like former and founding Avenger member the Hulk. While Hulk is on a rampage, the Avengers attempt to intercede in Immortal Hulk issue 47, and Blade thinks he has it all figured out. He thinks that Hulk has actually been transformed into a vampire thanks to his new/old powers like being stronger at night and being able to return from the dead. Blade might know vampires, but that doesn't mean he's always right when it comes to his suspicions. Hulk's response to Blade's accusation? To ask him if he can turn into a bat, being that Blade is also part vampire. Blade responds with no, and Hulk tells him it's a good time to learn as he tosses him up high and away. He's like, hey, can you do that? You can't? Great. Bye.
Number 4. Tony Stark and Reed Richards. I love when Spider-Man gets to show how smart he actually is. In Big Time The Amazing Spider-Man, the new Sinister Six has activated big boomies all over New York, and the Avengers are struggling with how to disarm and deactivate them in the 2 minutes and 28 seconds they have left. Reed Richards and Tony Stark, two of the smartest men on the whole planet, were going over options on how to disarm the thing. Freeze the thermal assembly? Nope. Use a sliver of vibranium? That won't do it. Spider-Man's got it. After taking a look at the clock, Peter runs over to the computer running the device and begins to sync up the timer with the system clock. Why the heck would he do that? Well, you see, it was the first Sunday in November, which means daylight savings time. Which means Peter just bought them an extra hour to get rid of the devices. Nice move, kid. Number 3. Spider-Man. Spider-Man and Iron Man here have a bit of an interesting relationship. In the MCU, it's very father-son, but in the comics, and specifically in the Civil War event, while Tony takes Peter under his wing and even gives him some great upgrades, actually manipulates the Spider-Lad quite a little bit. Spider-Man switches to Captain America's side, and in Iron Man Volume 4, number 14, Spider-Man, alongside a few other heroes, launch a surprise attack on Tony. While Spider-Man has beaten Tony before, specifically when Tony threatened Mary Jane and Aunt May, the use of the spider armor gave Tony a ton of information about Parker's spider sense. Not just being able to replicate it for himself, but he got the information to use Peter's against him, which he does while making a nice little baseball themed strike 1, 2, and 3, fitting as they are fighting at Yankee Stadium. Number 2. Nova. Look, comics back in the day weren't always written the best, okay? In Nova number 12, Richard Rider is trying to find the criminal who de-lifed his uncle, Ralph Rider, and he flies past Spider-Man doing battle with the criminal. Now, Nova has seen Spider-Man in the papers with wanted signs and articles saying that he's a crook. And if he's here, then Nova has gotta at least make sure he had nothing to do with Richard's uncle, right? Look, he was distraught, okay? This little scuffle doesn't really go Nova's way though. After he lands a kind of cheap shot on Spider-Man, he catches some webs to the visor, then a fist, and after he lifts Spidey into the air, he catches a nice pair of Spidey boots to the dome as well. And as with most embarrassing fights, Spidey is giving him an earful about the error of his ways in the most hilarious way possible. Number 1. The Avengers. This isn't so embarrassing in the direct sense. You see, when all the Avengers and the Fantastic Four were off in a pocket universe fighting the villain Onslaught, New York lost its main defenders. Spider-Man, by himself, stepped into the role of the Avengers. One guy filled the role of a whole team, defending New York from all supercrime, and keeping the people of New York in remembrance of the seemingly gone superheroes. You know what? It's just what Spider-Man would do. He would step up when things looked their bleakest and take the heavy weight of being solely responsible for defending the world. Now, yes, this was the clone of Peter Parker, Ben Reilly, but he holds the same morals and powers. And the man took on an invasion of Sentinels, so yeah, he is taking this one. There were other non-active Avengers on the Earth still, and while they were considering coming back as a team, Spider-Man just did it. Way to go, Tiger.